Welcome ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to take a look at the Magicka Warden build for Morrowind. This is a damage dealer build. So in the first part of the video I want to talk about the basics, gear, champion point, skills. The second part I want to explain like how good is the Magicka Warden actually. I also want to give you some options what you can change around to get better sustain. And I will also show you off the rotation for this setup here. Now when we look at our stats, we have insanely high max Magicka, and we also have a lot really decent Magicka recovery, spell crit and spell damage. You see I have 6 points into health. It's because I run 7 light, so I stay at the decent health level. I run the 5th Mundus Stone because to get more crit it's the best one to increase damage. I recommend being a high elf because you get flame, frost and shock damage. You get 10% max Magicka, 9% Magicka recovery. A dark elf, Breton also works, or even an imperial if you want to, but high elf is definitely the best one. I recommend being a vampire because you get 10% more max Magicka from this passive if you're vampire stage 2 or higher. However, be aware that if you're in a dungeon that has a lot of fire damage, you take more damage as a vampire, so you have to be careful. Now in terms of food, I use the normal one, max health, max Magicka, and potions, we use those here. Now keep in mind, I just use those because they are the easiest to get, but we also get the major prophecy and major sorcery buff from skills, so you don't necessarily need to use those. You could use normal potions. I just use those here because they have a duration of over 45 seconds, so you're sure that the buff never drops off. I will talk more about this buff food later, or drink or whatever. Now in terms of gear, we run 5 Necro because it's the strongest set with this class. You only need to use the Netch on 1 bar and it will stay, like no matter where it is, it will not drop off. That's the nice thing about the Netch. Now run Divine on the small pieces and either Infused or Divine on the big ones. The difference is basically 0, so just use what you find, Infused or Divines. The next thing what you can do is, so you have 3 Moondancer jewelry here, all spell damage glyphs. Now, you can run 3 Moondancer here and 2 more Moondancers here if you want to, because Groftar is only good when you're melee. You also could use Valkin here. But I'm just saying, if you want, you can run 5 Moondancer, 5 Necro. Because the Moondancer proc is actually pretty strong. It gives you really nice recovery and or spell damage. So that's really cool. That basically gets rid of all your sustain issues if you use this combo. Then you just will not have a monster set. I'm also saying you could run Valkin because it would give you a nice health amount, so you don't need to put points into the health attribute. And Valkin does like maybe 10% less damage than Grofgar overall, so it's a really small difference. In terms of weapons, so there is a Maelstrom Inferno stuff and a Shock stuff. So I have this on the front bar and this on the back bar. We are using the Drain Magicka poisons. Now they're very expensive, so I will explain later what else you can do. I am aware not a lot of people have Maelstrom weapons, so on my website there is easy to get gear setups for beginners. There's alternative setups. For example, you could run Necro staves here, or you could run a Moondancer staves, like Moondancer staves here. It's just one option, like this is the best in slot setup. But there is other options that you can run. You also can run Julianos instead of Necro if you don't have access to Necro, because Julianos is craftable, but you will lose a little bit DPS. In terms of champion points, 46. Why do I have points here? Simply, especially in the new trial, you have to break free a lot, so I think it's nice to have like reduced break free cost. Then 100 Arcanist, 64 Tenacity. You also could swap that around, you see, 15%, 13%. The difference is so small. barely matters. 56, 56, then 23 Master at Arms, and 75 Thaumaturge. We have 75 here because Exploiter. I am aware we are not at the jump point, but doesn't matter, we just need 75 points for this. Now, I just mentioned jump points. What are jump points? Basically, when you invest points here, you see now I have 9.83. I lose a lot of points because this percentage amount only gives me a benefit of 9%. So the 21, 22 is basically useless. Those are jump points. On my website under guides you will find a better explanation. If you don't know what jump points are for champion points, make sure to go check it out. It's very important. 61 Ironclad, free spell shield, and then we have 48, 49, 49. It's just overall the champion system gives us more damage mitigation and slightly more damage, so it's really nice what they did here. In terms of skills, so it is very important to have a destruction staff ability on each bar because of this. You see, flame staff increases your damage done with single target abilities by 8%. Lightning staff increases your damage done with area effect abilities by 8%. Now, what do we have here? First, the shock clench. That's one of the destruction abilities because we have nothing else here from this. It's very important to have this here. You also could run the blockade on the front bar, but I just prefer this. This deals decent amount of damage. It's fairly expensive, so maybe only use it when you have a decent amount of Magicka left. You can weapon swap cancel this, very nice though. Like you see, this is the full animation, and when I weapon swap, you barely see the animation. So it doesn't cost you a lot of time to apply it actually. Deep Fissure. Now this is your hardest hitting ability. It pops up every 3 seconds. Then you have to use it again. And then we have Scream's Cliff Racer. If you are further away, it deals 15% more damage. So that's why I say Moon Dancer setup, like 5 Moon Dancer, 5 Necro is not bad, or with Valkin. Because with Groftar, you lose the 15% extra damage. It's not the world's end though, I mean. Lotus Blossom, now this is here because, you see, Embraces the Lotus Blessing, causing light attacks to restore a small amount of health or the heavy attacks. It gives us a small heal over time, and it gives us this passive. When healing an ally with a green balance ability, gain 250 Magicka or stamina. This is a very strong ability, like passive. One of the strongest passives in terms of resource management actually. So that's why we keep this up. Then we have Inner Light, just to get more 7% more max Magicka. Northern Storm. We don't really use this ultimate. We only have it here to have the 8% max Magicka. And obviously if you want to use it, you get major protection. 30% damage reduction is also nice in certain situations. Blockade of Fire, basically a must-have, especially if a Maelstrom weapon. It's your one of the strongest dots. Winter's Revenge actually competes with Blockade of Fire. Those two always have to be kept up. You see, this has 8 seconds, this has 12 seconds. However, every time I swap to the back bar, I recast both. Harness Magicka to shield up, because you don't want to die. It's a huge shield you get. Fetcher Infection. Now this is a very nice dot. You could cast it twice, but I recommend only casting it once. Basically every time I go to the back bar, I reapply my Winter's Revenge, I reapply the Blockade, and I reapply the Fetcher. And every second time I activate the Netch. So it never runs out. The Netch itself doesn't cost anything, it's free, but it gives you 4k Magicka back over 25 seconds, so it's really nice. Then we have the Destro Ultimate, the strongest ultimate here, hits like the truck, costs a lot, but still AoE wise, and just also see it just hits so hard. Now a few things to mention. You see here, this gives us the Major Sorcerer sorcery, increasing spell damage, and we get major prophecy from this skill and this skill. So you don't necessarily need to use those. Like I said, you already have the first 2 buffs. All you really want is the max, like the restore Magicka amount. I just like to use this because they're in the stores, easy to get, and they have over a 45 seconds duration, so they don't fall off if you have the medicinal use passive from alchemy. Now a few points to mention in terms of passive. I mentioned this one, very important. Other than that, here there's nothing really interesting. Piercing Cold increases your magic and frost damage by 6%, so that's nice. As you can see, we don't really have a lot of frost damage. The only frost damage we have is this one. It's a really strong ability, but it's the only one worth using. So the Warden overall, as a full DPS class, you can't really build him. You can build him towards a frost setup, but it will not be optimal. Magic abilities, we have this here, magic damage. Then we have this, magic damage, magic damage. So it's really nice. Gets boosted by quite a lot of things. Other than that, most passives useless. Here, when one of your animal companions is killed or unsummoned, you restore 1300 health. So actually every time I cast the Cliff Racer, this passive procs. At least it used to on the PTS, so I'm pretty sure it still works. So because for some reason it counts, like every time a Cliff Racer is gone or like goes away, it counts as a dying animal, something like that. Then we have this, activating an animal companion ability grants 4 ultimate. Has a 8 seconds cooldown. Obviously we have so many abilities, this and this. It will always be proccing almost on cooldown, so you don't have to worry about this. Increases your Magicka and stamina recovery by 12%. If you have like animal companion ability slotted, so we have 2 here and we have 2 here. I just want to explain and to show you the most important passives in case you want to change around the abilities. It is very important to note that you shouldn't just copy paste the build, take the most important information out and then adopt your own build with those kind of things. So you don't necessarily need to have the same setup. But like I said, Ancient Knowledge passive with a destruction ability on each bar, very important, and all that kind of stuff that you don't want to miss. That's it about the setup. In terms of sustain, what can you do? Like I said, this ability is very important that you keep it up, simply because of the passive. Then we have Drain Magicka Poisons. Now those are quite expensive, but it's probably one of the best things to have good sustain. As you see, every second they give us 240 Magicka back for 5.5 seconds. That's a lot, and it procs a lot. But then again, in 3 hours you use up almost like 2000 of them, or like maybe 1.5k, something like that. Next thing you could do is, you could use the Witch Mother's Potent Brew, increases your max Magicka by 3.2, max health and Magicka recovery. When we look at our stats, when I'm fully buffed, 52k, 17k health and 900 magic, 1k Magicka recovery. I use this, I drop down to 49k max Magicka, 15k max health and 1.6k Magicka recovery. So that's probably one of the cheapest things that you actually can do. You need to make sure to adjust your health level, because if you go into a raid with 15k health, that's nobody will be happy because you will be constantly dead. So you have to get again 17k health and then you can invest everything into the Magicka. So you see, we drop a lot of Magicka with this version, but your health amount is going to stay the same if you put 90 points into attributes. And we have a lot of Magicka recovery. You will not have any sustain issues. When you use the Witch Mother's Potent Brew, you don't even need to use those. But again, you lose damage. Now, you also can do heavy attacks from time to time. They restore quite a huge amount of Magicka actually. That's another version. However, I do know that a lot of people dislike heavy attacks. They're fairly fast. You don't need to use them all the time, but maybe every free rotation 1-2 heavy attacks should already be enough. That's another thing you can do. You also could use Magicka recovery glyphs or cost deduction glyphs on the jewelry. However, this would be your last resort because the spell damage here is very important. 174 spell damage is insane, so you really don't want to lose this. And obviously, if you're lower champion points or something, you could use Seducer instead of Necro, but I do think Necro benefits the Warden a lot. Seducer is a really nice choice because it gives you cost reduction and quite a lot of magic recovery, but you lose damage. That's about the resource management. There is a lot of good options, you just have to get used to it and experiment around a little bit, because everybody has different sustain. In a raid, some people get a lot of spears or orbs, so they have less sustain issues than others, so it's very important to play around. Now in terms of rotation, so like I said, when we go to the back bar, every time we go here, I apply this, the blockade, the fetcher and weapon swap. And then every second time I go to the back bar, I apply the Winter's Revenge, this, the fetchers, and then I use the netch and weapon swap. So I animation cancel this dude really hard. On the front bar, you have the Deep Fissure and the Cliff Racer that you want to keep up, and the Lotus Blossom. So what I do, what you want to make sure if you are on PC, use Frendar to track the Blockade of Fire. If you're on console, track Fetcher Infections or the Shock Clench. Because on console I think the buff tracker doesn't allow to track ground-based abilities. So just to show you off the rotation quickly, we use this first. So what you can see, basically, I'm on the back bar, I apply my dots, then I swap. The first thing you want to do is activate the Fissure, because it's your strongest hard-hitting ability. Once you did that, obviously always do light attacks, you do 2 Cliff Racers, then you do another Deep Fissure, and then you use the Shock Clench and weapon swap. That's basically rotation. Winter's Revenge, Blockade, Fetcher, if you have to activate the Netch, Fissure, 2 Cliff Racers, another Fissure, Clench, weapon swap. You want to use the Fissure as much as possible, so you see, the moment we come to the front bar, we activate the Fissure, we do 2 Cliff Racers and it pops up, and we can use it already again. Then the Clench and weapon swap. That's very important. I've already done some DPS tests on the PTS, so you also can go check it out there if you want to. That's basically it about the rotation. Just don't forget to keep this up. It has a 20 seconds duration. This here has a 25 seconds duration. So you really only have to worry about this and this. If you cast it every second rotation, it's nice, I guess. You also can cast it every third one, but then you will lose the buff a little bit. Other than that, everything is fixed in the rotation. This, Deep Fissure, Cliff Racer, Deep Fissure, Shock Clench, weapon swap again. The bear. A lot of you might ask, yeah, can we use the bear? So basically, pure single target. The bear is stronger, okay? However, you need AoE damage in trials or dungeons, so I recommend running the Destro Ultimate together with the Northern Storm for the extra max Magicka. But again, just test out, you know, this is just a suggestion. Test out stuff, give it a try, and you will see what you like more. In terms of where does Magicka Warden stand? So I do think currently it's one of the weaker, if not the weakest Magicka setup, because single target is just so much lower compared to other setups. AoE damage is actually pretty nice. It's just it lacks single target DPS, and that's where the problems is. And I hope Zenimax will try to buff it a little bit further. They just have to be careful not to over buff it, obviously. But the class itself, it's fun to play. The animations look really sick, and if they develop it a little bit further, it's gonna be a really good setup. That's basically it. If you have any questions, please ask me in the comment section below. Thank you for watching and have a nice day. Cheers.